Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Mike Wade. Thank you for tuning in to Dissect and Connect, a podcast where we explore population health issues impacting your community. This podcast is a service of Montgomery County Prevention Partners and New River Valley Community Services. Our podcast is made possible by a grant from Carilion Clinic. The views expressed in this program may not reflect those of Carilion Clinic. Bentley Wood is a lifelong resident of the New River Valley and is also in recovery from substance use and mental health disorders. He currently works for New River Valley Community Services as a certified and registered peer recovery specialist. Bentley is a February 2019 graduate of the Montgomery County Adult Drug Treatment Court and a former client of NRVCS. In his current position as a peer specialist, Bentley provides peer support services to individuals served through the Medication-Assisted Treatment Program, the SAFE program, and Montgomery County Drug Treatment Court participants. He also works to support others who are both seeking and in recovery through the 401 Peer Center. Bentley collaborates with community partners by educating individuals and groups about substance use disorders and the treatments and supports available. He spends much of his free time expanding his knowledge and understanding of recovery pathways. Today, he is able to enjoy healthy relationships with his 2 daughters and other family members, as well as his friends in recovery. Bentley loves his life today. So Bentley, welcome to the Dissect and Connect podcast.
Thank you. Good morning, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So we are recording this in the spring of 2020, and I don't think we can have a conversation, obviously, without talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to throw a question at you that I have been asking of all of my recent guests, and that is, besides having a greater appreciation for toilet paper, how have you been personally impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic?
It's made me appreciate a lot of little things that I guess early in recovery I learned to appreciate, but I've gained appreciation like simply being able to talk to someone face to face. Personally, I live with my 78-year-old mother lives with me, and I concern myself about being out, going back, and then of course she likes to go out because she gets bored.
Right.
So, there's a level of concern that typically exists, but mostly I just miss the interaction with people.
Yeah, that's an adjustment for all of us, for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's like relearning, I was talking to someone last night. It's like, 4 years ago when my journey, as a matter of fact, it was exactly 4 years ago today that that the law enforcement encouraged me to stop doing the things that I was doing.
Is that right?
And yeah, ironically, I just noticed the date. But
oh, wow.
It's, I've gone through the process of learning how to live again.
Right.
That's what the, recovery is. It's
right.
Learning a new way. And this reminds me that I've done this, I can do it again.
That's a great way to look at it. So for those who are listening that might not know, could you explain a little bit more about what a peer specialist is, what that means?
I'm a person with lived experience with both substance use disorder or other types of addiction, as well as, in my case, co-diagnosis. I have mental health diagnoses that are also managed with therapy and medications, and I work with other people who are in the early stages, whether they be by choice or whether law enforcement or someone else has put them there to seek treatment. I don't provide treatment. I provide support services. So I work with people on building a wellness plan, helping them say, so what do you want to achieve in life? Not this is what you need to do coming from me, but asking them, what is it you want to do? And how can I support you? And how can we work together to create a plan to help you get there? And the confidentiality things are a little different. Folks can talk to me about things that don't get reported, that they might be uncomfortable sharing with someone else. So there's some unique pieces about what a peer does.
Yeah. But that lived experience piece, it's just so valuable, I think, for folks who are struggling and coming into treatment and beginning their journey of recovery, to be able to connect with someone who has been there and done that, so to speak.
Yeah, not everyone knows what it feels like to spend Christmas Day in a jail, or to walk into a courtroom shackled, those are experiences that we can talk about,
Right.
in myself with the folks that I serve and support. But outside of that space, it's not a very common topic of conversation.
Yeah, to say the least. Hey, could you talk a little bit more about your job specifically at NRVCS and the kind of things that you're doing right now?
Currently, I work within the MAT, or Medically Assisted Treatment Program. The primary medication there is Suboxone. I support folks who are in our medically assisted treatment program who need additional support outside of just clinical. I also, as a Montgomery County Drug Court alumni, I also work with Montgomery County Drug Court participants who are also clients of our agency, providing them support services. And I'm currently assisting with the 401 Peer Center, where we're no longer open to the public, but we're still maintaining a Facebook page, trying to throw some information and some positive things out there, as well as hosting a daily Zoom hangout where the staff that works at the 401, they're still available for people to come and talk to virtually.
Yeah, and I want to come back and talk about 401 a little bit more later on in the conversation. I think before we go any further, it might be good to just take pause, and it's really it's kind of neat, I suppose, is a good way to put it, that this happens to be the 4-year anniversary of your the start of your journey. So I was hoping maybe you could take a few minutes to share a little bit about your story and just kind of walk us through what you've been through over the last 4 years.
Well, it started out with the Drug Task Force raid at my house. They showed up at 9:47 a.m. on April 29th, 2016. Not that I remember or anything. But, I never thought I had a drug problem. I was doing what I wanted to do. I've since come to realize that, recreational drug users don't manufacture and sell it. So, in the beginning, I had some real trouble understanding that I had a problem. And, I was taken to jail. I got out at that time. Drug court didn't exist in Montgomery County. It was something that was in the planning stages. And I happened to, have a family that was supportive of me and understood that I have an illness, not badness. Found an attorney who understood what was going on with drug court. And he challenged me, then I got entered into treatment when I got out of jail the first time. And it took a couple months before I truly began to even consider that I might have a problem. And, a big turning point came when the individual who worked with me as my peer in the same role that I work with people now, challenged me in ways that, a clinical staff person's not going, they're not going to be allowed to do that.
Right.
And so, as I did multiple times, I showed up at a meeting with him, promised me he'd meet me there, and he told me, if you come and you don't like it, you don't ever have to come back, and I will never ask you again. So in my mind, I'm going to shut him up so he'll leave me alone. And, but it's a lot of work. I was hitting 3 meetings a day for more than 3 months every day. I was attending treatment. I was on probation. I was showing up every Friday to check in with my pretrial services worker, and taking random drug screens there, attending treatment 3 times a week, I think it was, individual counseling as well as group therapy, and in contact with my attorney because that's what he asked me to do. And then I started going to meetings because up until the meetings, even though I had these other folks in my life, I didn't think anybody understood what that hopeless, lonely feeling that, no one's ever faced 8 felony charges like I did. No one understands that, where I am in life, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. Yeah. And it's hard to hang on to hope. Having to sit down in front of my 2 daughters and, tell them, hey, here's what's going on. Yeah. These are tough conversations to have with people. And in time, I began to accept the fact that, well, recreational drug users don't do the things that I was doing. Yeah. Need to be high to go out in public. They don't plan their life around getting and using substances. Yeah. And that's what my life looked like before. And I heard this early on in recovery. I said, I went to my first meeting to get out of trouble, but what I found was a new way to live.
Yeah. Wow.
A really good way to describe my experience is that I started this recovery process, which I didn't even know was a recovery process,
Mm-hmm.
trouble. But what I found was a new way to live. And we have a saying here at the 401 that says, I used to be a hopeless dope dealer, and today I'm a dopeless hope dealer.
I like it. Yeah.
So, that's a very high level overview, but it took a willingness to change.
So back before your house was raided 4 years ago, how extensive was your history of substance use?
I'd used alcohol my whole life, but of course alcohol's legal, so I didn't consider it to be a drug.
Right.
And then when I separated from my ex-wife, today I identify as a gay man. I was married to a woman for 22 years, and so I was quite a miserable human being.
Yeah.
When I finally found the courage through therapy, the first time I went through any kind of behavioral health treatment, I came to realize that the only person who could change me was me. And it's at that point in time when we separated that my drug use outside of alcohol began. And within a year, I went from getting high a couple times with somebody hanging on the weekends to buying and selling my drugs of choice.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that year, anything I could get my hands on, I would use. And so, I look back and see the spiral.
Right.
It was kind of like in this holding spot, like in a holding pattern over the airport. An airplane just kind of circles around at a high level.
Yep.
Well, that's what I did for about 30 years of my life. I went through, as I reflect back in my late teens and early 20s, I went through a period of heavy use and in drugs more than just alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got married, my ex-wife told me I couldn't do those things, so I stopped.
Right.
I hear folks in AA talk about how that sometimes women who get pregnant, they stop using, and they don't use during the time their children are growing up, and as soon as their children leave the house, they fall right back into that use. I've heard that story on more than one occasion.
Really?
My drug use parallels that in some ways, except for me, it was seeking acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Someone where I was willing to modify my behavior, so my dependence and addiction became that relationship.
Right.
And then when that relationship was gone, I found a new relationship with drugs, which is the relationship I had beforehand. So, this is all anecdotal, so there's no evidence to support what I'm saying other than just that's my experience.
Yeah.
But, Mike, it took every single thing that I've experienced in my life to bring me to the place where I am today. And I used to feel like everything happened to me. And today I recognize that all those things were done for me. I've been put in a situation where I can help other people who experience the same or similar pains that I did.
You've mentioned the drug court treatment program a couple of times already. And that's how you and I first met while you were actively involved in that program. Why did that work for you?
It provided some hope. I was looking at 7 felony charges and about 10 years in prison. And drug court was an opportunity for me to potentially, work my way through a program that gave me a chance to not come out as a convicted felon. The accountability piece was there. The treatment, it wasn't optional. If I wanted to stay in the program, for the first time in my life, I was required. I couldn't manipulate my way around requirements of a program and still receive the benefits. Support from some wonderful people. Lori Trail, who runs who oversees the program, case managers, and the judges, Judge Long and Judge Turk. They're both awesome people. To go from walking in a courtroom in shackles, dressed in orange, terrified, able to cut up and joke and laugh with a judge, at a graduation ceremony or at, just after court, it really reshaped my perspective and it's helped me understand that, while there may be flaws in our system, the system didn't do anything to me. It's the trauma and the unhealthy ways of dealing with experiences in my life that gave me the opportunity to be there.
Yeah.
And, so I think that for me, it was the accountability, the oversight, the relationships that I was able to build. I mean, it's curfews in drug court, and having the compliance officers come by and, knock on the door and come outside and have a conversation, not because they're, supervising or trying to catch me, because they're there to support me, to help me be successful. Not me doing, and in the past, if you were law enforcement, you were out to catch me doing something wrong. And what I recognize today is that that's not the case. So it allowed me to see folks in a position of authority in a different way, to build relationships with those folks. Some of those folks today I call my friends, and, probation officer, all these people I never, I didn't know NRVCS existed before I got in trouble. So, because I was brought up at a time when, the mental health, there was shame in having any kind of mental health diagnosis. So only weak people seek help. That's kind of the environment that I grew up in. And to go from believing that for much of my life to actually having experienced as a client and now working for the agency, it's the most wonderful thing for me is watching someone go from that hopeless place that I can relate to finding a job and finding housing and, rekindling relationships with family, and sometimes somebody, they get on a path of recovery for a year or 2 years and they've had, outstanding criminal charges, after being, working a healthy program of recovery for a while, they end up going back to jail, and that's tough because in this moment, I know that I'm doing what I need to do to be that productive, responsible member of society, but, our actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences feel unfair. It's one of my favorite documentaries is by Dr. Kevin McCauley called Pleasure and Loathing. And he says in there that addiction is the only disease we treat with the criminal justice system. And, that's not technically, literally true, but there's a lot of truth in that statement.
Yeah.
So to be a part of a program that's helping to shift the way communities see substance use disorder, the way law enforcement and prosecutors and attorneys and probation officers, to watch the paradigm shift within those individuals. Because we're not going to change our society's perception of addiction, as a community. We're going to do it one person at a time, and each of those people are going to do it one person at a time until our community begins to shift. So, I can either be frustrated at the people who don't support it and don't understand what drug court is. It's not a get out of jail free. It's an opportunity to find a new way to live.
Yeah.
Support and to get the treatment that one needs to do that.
So Bentley, can you talk a little bit about relapse as it pertains to substance use disorders?
Some common examples that I see. I do a lot of reading and a lot of peer-reviewed articles, and reading a lot of research. And, when one looks at conditions like diabetes or asthma or, COPD or other heart conditions, the word relapse, which I personally wish could be removed from the vernacular of treatment, because the definition says relapse is basically a period of regression after a point of improvement. It doesn't say anything about drugs. So once cancer and they have a recurrence or a relapse, we support them and we give them help. And with substance use disorder, if somebody has a return to use, whether it be a slip where they do it once or whether they, go back, it's a sign that, Carlo DiClemente is one of my favorite researchers. He's part of developing a stages of change model that I happen to use a lot in my conversations with people when we're talking about change. He talks about, he's the one who says we need to get rid of the word relapse. Let's call it a slip. Let's call it a return to use. Because, I go out and get high one weekend because I run into the wrong people, not intentionally. And then I come back and say, hey, this happened. Will you help me? There are places like drug court where one can get help and support. There are places outside of drug court where that gets somebody put back in jail. He says that a slip is simply a sign that something in the recovery program is not working and needs to be evaluated. So that's kind of the way I look at it, is if somebody has a return to use, and the first thing to look at is environment. Or did somebody get pulled out of the place where they were using, get treatment, and go right back and live in the same place with the same people doing the same things? If I have a heart attack and I live with people who eat, fried chicken and gravy and biscuits and, these diets and I go back and live with them, are they going to start feeding me steamed broccoli, or are they going to continue to cook the same things? And for me, drug use is no different. And in our community, especially, housing and transportation and childcare are three major obstacles that create barriers where the socioeconomic status of an individual has everything to do with their chances of recovery.
That's a great point. You talked a little bit about the 401 Peer Center earlier. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the value of that program, that facility?
Yeah, it's I think 3 or 4 years ago, a grant was pursued. I'm sure you know more about the background history than I do of the flow. But it started out as someone's dream, and people started believing that dream's a possibility. And then grant funding was found, and we were selected as an agency and as a community to build the Peer Center. It's not treatment. Treatment can't be provided out of this space. So it's a place where people come as they are. It's not just for people with substance use or just for people who have mental health diagnosis. It's a safe space for people to come. We have computers connected to a printer, connected to the internet, where somebody can come in and get help putting a resume together, or looking for jobs or asking about additional resources. We have TVs with the game system and Netflix and Hulu, and where people can just come in and relax. We have snacks and light meal food available, where if somebody's hungry, they can come in and get something to eat. We have a shower in the bathroom, and we actually had folks who live on the street here to bathe. And so we provide a service to people in recovery because we host recovery meetings, and we have peer staff here available to just kind of talk about life with people, kind of point them in the direction of resources, whether it be through our agency of behavioral health, whether it be community action, or some other community services that somebody needs, to kind of connect them with the people who, we're almost like a community triage that includes a safe space. Mm-hmm. And, I've been around here long enough now to be able to see a lot of people who I met first here who are doing, there are 2 people within this agency I met when they were actively using who now work in this agency as a peer specialist. And I'm fortunate enough to have been connected to those individuals, to be able to see where someone was and see where they are. And, the 401, it doesn't just help the folks who walk in the door. It helps those of us who work with the agency to know that we're providing a support to the community that's bigger than just the space that we're in. The fact that we have more people looking at our Facebook page now than before tells me, that people are still engaging with us. Mm-hmm. Go into Zoom and, hang out and sit there and talk to Rachel. Got a couple of clients that regularly came into the 401 who are now showing up, people whose mental health conditions, their hospitalization, all kinds of positive things happen that are bigger than we know. I like to think that we are a place of synergy, and synergy being, where the sum of the parts is greater, the combined parts are greater than the sum of the individual parts. And I feel like that in some ways, we are a dopeless hope dealer.
I really like that. The early data during the COVID-19 pandemic shows that there's an increase in overdose, even some fatalities in our communities. So I wonder if you might be able to address why a situation like the one that we're currently in is so concerning for people who are in recovery.
Well, most, and a lot of what I'm going to say comes from 12-step fellowship, because that's where I found a lot of my recovery. That's not the only pathway. That's just the pathway that worked for me. But we have to learn how to live a different way, and because I don't know anyone who grew up and said, you know what, I want to be a heroin junkie when I grow up, or I don't want to lie to people and steal money out of people's pocketbooks because my brain tells me I need this more than I need anything else. And I think having a connection with other people is really important. I don't know many people who, if you're treated for cancer, we don't put you out there and say, deal with it. We surround them with a support network, whether it be through medical services, behavioral health services, or whether it be community support services. And the recovery community and the network of people getting together, it's one of the few safe connections. Because for me, alcohol is not an okay thing to use. And when I look around me in the community, a lot of social activities, alcohol's become normalized in our society. For those of us in recovery from substance use disorder, especially early on, it's hard enough for me not to use every day, let alone be put in a space where I'm around people who are using, and especially if one of my favorite beverages is there. So I think that loss of social connection is a huge piece.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Zoom meetings and the WebEx meetings and the, all the telecommunications and telehealth services that people can still receive, it is better. 40 years ago, none of that would have been as an option. But it doesn't replace, I miss hugs probably more than I miss anything else.
Yeah.
In the recovery community, we typically are huggers. And so, just having that human interaction. And even for a long time, I think there's going to be a level of fear that exists within that interaction once we start going back, which eventually, I've done some reading about the 1918 flu pandemic, and it's, and I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But, a lot of things that I read there, I see parallels to in our society right now in terms of the debates that are going on and the decisions that are being made. Almost everyone who spent any time in active addiction is at an elevated risk. Whether it be because we smoked something and damaged our lungs, or whether we contracted some sort of immunity compromising condition. And it's, I don't know. It's the tough part is missing the hugs and the being able to talk to people, and just being able to get in a space.
So, any advice for folks who might be struggling with addiction that find themselves maybe in more of a vulnerable position now because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, well, I don't give advice. I offer suggestions, because for me, advice is my best guess for what might work for you. A suggestion is, here's what I'm doing. Do you think it might work for you?
Fair enough.
So, not to call you out on that, but it's important to me that I'm very semantic in terms of I choose intentionally. But the first thing someone can do if you're listening to this is go online and check out the 401 Facebook page. There's a lot of resources there. You can message us here at the 401. We have the peers available on the Zoom Hangouts. You can call us at 540-443-2663. That's the warm line here at the Peer Center, and it's manned from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. And there are also links and access to national hotlines if somebody needs, whether it be a suicide crisis hotline or some other, our access services at 961-8400 if somebody finds themselves, in a difficult situation, that's still available as an option. And talk to other people in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Follow the guidelines that are out there to keep yourself and others safe. Social distancing, we're doing that for a reason. Wearing a mask, I had a friend make me an oversized face mask because I'm an oversized person. And, I don't go in public without having my face mask on. And I'm doing that to protect other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it looks like a lot of people are sick who don't know they're sick and are making other people sick. And that's the scary thing about this disease. This particular time is a lot more uncertainty, and a lot of the supports that are typically available, like, probation. Right now, people don't get called into probation office for drug screens right now because for safety and health reasons, so there's a lot of the accountability, is call each other out. If I'm behaving in a way that's unhealthy for me, tell me, because you're either, if you make me mad, so what? You're trying to save my life. Find links to Zoom meetings, NA, AA, Celebrate Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Vocal and Sarah have websites that offer resources. If somebody has a cell phone, computer, and internet, there are lots of places to get help. So call us here at the 401. Get on the Zoom hangout. The information is there on the Facebook page. We start at 10 o'clock from 10 to 12, and then from 3 to 5 weekdays. So it's a big deal right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's life and death for a lot of people, but for those of us in recovery, I would say that it's important that we observe those guidelines.
Yeah. And we'll include links to the 401 Facebook page and some of the other things that you've mentioned in the show notes for today's episode. I mentioned in your introduction through your bio, you made a point to mention that you love your life now. I was wondering if maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Well, I could elaborate a lot, but I'll try to elaborate. I experienced lots of trauma growing up that I didn't recognize as trauma. So I had all these underlying issues that I didn't know were there. So when I got into treatment, I came to understand that a lot of things that happened to me when I was a child, it wasn't my fault, and I can be angry about it and want to hurt the people who hurt me. And, in indirect ways, I did that for a lot of my life. Not intentionally, but understanding that trauma was real and understanding that it's not my fault and understanding that I made choices that weren't healthy for me. And once I got help and realized I'm a sick person, I wasn't a bad person, or a moral failing, as it's commonly said. I was a good person who didn't know what bad things were. I have a relationship with my family today. I have, the people that I used with, and some of the people I used with for a long time, none of those people have ever called to say, hey, how are you doing? And so, those really weren't my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So today I have a network of friends, people who call and just say, hey, how are you doing? People who care about me, people who let me care about them. And if someone asks for help, I'm not going to say you got to give me money for a ride or, I'll do this for you if you do that for me. I get to come to work. And again, I'll wear this out is I get to come to work and deal hope every single day. And it's challenging in different ways now with what's going on around us. We all spend a lot more time doing things in very different ways than we used to, but the fact that we can still do them, that's the gift. So I'm okay being me today. So, and I've come to accept that. If I don't like something about myself, I'm the only person who can change it. So I either change it or I live with it, and I'm okay with it.
Any parting words of wisdom or a final takeaway for our audience?
If you're having trouble with substances or the internet or shopping, because addiction is more than just substance use disorder. There are a lot of addictive behaviors that really cause trouble for people's lives. The shame is in not asking for help. There's no shame in asking for help. I'm very much a mean person, and I saw one the other day that said something like, if I don't like the voices I'm hearing, keep moving forward until I can't hear the voices anymore.
Mm.
So basically, surround myself with people who have similar objectives and similar goals. And it's okay to be afraid. It's okay not to know.
Well, Bentley, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. And I just want to thank you again for your time and really enjoyed our conversation. Hope to have you back on for a future episode at some point.
All right. Anything I can do to help.
All right. Well, listen, thanks again and have a great day.
Thanks, Mike. You do the same.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Dissect and Connect. For more information about Montgomery County Prevention Partners, our New River Valley Community Services, be sure to check us out on Facebook or visit nrvcs.org.